the number one thing that comes out, the number one question that I get is that people say, "What can I say other than I'm sorry?"
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
That seems to be the biggest question. And because even though some people don't mind the word hearing I'm sorry, sometimes I've heard grievers say, I don't want to hear it again. And I'm not against saying I'm sorry because you're sorry that this is happening. But I think if you can just add another sentence to it, you'll be fine. Mostly what people want to hear is relationship. It's really all about
Right.
the relationship. So if you're go up to someone, you don't have to say it. You can say, it's a colleague at work, and say this. You can say this sucks if it's someone who's appropriate with that. You don't have to say anything. You can just say this sucks. You can say I'm really gonna miss Bob. He's the funniest guy at work. That's other than I'm sorry. I'm Barbara Bowman, and I'm so grateful. Just thank you so much for sharing me with your audience and the message that we're here to talk about, which is I wrote this book. It's really a guide, and it's a punchy version of what not to do at funerals, and really also how to support grievers. It's not There's a lot that's down and depressing about when someone passes, and it definitely makes people awkward and confused, and you've lost one relationship, and so often other relationships are now affected by this and damaged and sometimes lost completely just for some ridiculous thing that someone did that they didn't realize they were going to do, or should have done, that they didn't know they had to do. And this is a way to just help keep those relationships fresh and let people have a grip on those awkward situations that come up when someone passes. And I've had, most of my family has passed. So I've had a good opportunity to be a receiver from folks trying to be supportive and people who were not supportive and were shocking. And I've had a lot of opportunity to be there for other people. So all of that knowledge and some of the work I do during the week, which pays my bills, I've heard so many stories of people that would come in and say, yeah, I haven't been around. My brother passed. And I said, oh, that's terrible. I'm sorry that you've had to go through all of that stress and that loss. They go, yeah, but you know what happened? And the first thing they want to tell me is something crazy thing that happened that broke up their family or someone that didn't respond. And these things stay with people. And after so many opportunities and so many stories, I thought someone's got to tell people what to do.
Yeah.
And so I did.
This episode is brought to you by Excel Coaching Academy. Hey guys, I'm really excited to let you know that I started a mindset coaching business. So what I want to do with this business is I want to help entrepreneurs, business owners, salespeople, leaders, and fitness enthusiasts or athletes develop the right mindset to increase revenue, improve business or performance, and overcome the challenges needed to become the best version of themselves. You can get more information about this by emailing info@excelcoaching.academy. Well, I'll say this, man. I think it's definitely, I think there's definitely a need for that sort of message or that space, because I think there's a lot of, people have a lot of different reactions to death. I feel like people grieve in different ways. And,
True.
there's an expression that says you don't really know a person until you travel with them, until you live with them, or until money's involved. But I think also grief is in there too, because I think there's like a common, I guess, process that you go through to heal. But I think other people too, handle it. I think that people in the space handle it differently. And I think people who are sort of, I guess, on the outside trying to comfort these people handle it differently.
True.
Yeah. And
you only really people relate through their own experiences.
mm-hmm.
And so two things come out of that I'm thinking of from what you just said. And one is that I don't think people can understand grief until they have it.
Mm.
Unfortunately, you're a man for this analogy, but it's kind of like pregnancy. You can read all you want about it, mm-hmm. but until you actually go through it, you really don't know. And so there's certain experiences that you can't process, you can't really understand. You can do your best, But until you go through it, you don't have grief in your life. You may have love in your life, curiosity in your life, fear in your life. But grief is something, is an emotion and an experience that is not part of your being until you go through it. Something that is added in to your experience of life and will then transform every other experience of your life after that. And so it's becomes part of the role of the griever, unfortunately, to help those people who haven't gone through it to be better people. And it is unique to everyone. And the deeper the relationship you have with the person who has passed, or the pet that's passed, or the situation, the more intense, more heavy, more long-lived is that grief, because there's levels of grief is related to the levels of your relationship. But until you have that, it's not part of your being, in my personal opinion.
That's a good way to put that. And I think something else, sort of like maybe a side note to that, is it makes life more real for all of us, because it shows us that there's so many differences between people in the world, man. But I think one thing that we do all have in common is that one day will be our last day. One day on this planet is going to be the last day that we are here. And I think death or grief for people, I think that really brings that to reality. I think that people, when they're in that situation, they're obviously grieving, they're upset, they're hurt from that. But I think what it does is it really brings, it's like I don't know how to explain it. It's like it makes it real, because, I'm sure you've heard this before. A lot of people, their reaction to grief is to, say, a family member dies, is to become closer to the other family members. Well, why do they do that? Because they see that time is limited. It takes you, it puts your perspective on time, that like this thing, whatever this is we are experiencing, is a limited thing. And you can say maybe that's a positive thing. I mean, they lost a loved one, and hopefully people understand that message before that point. But I think it's often the case that that people are in that space and they see that time is limited, and that there's really only one guarantee that you have in life, is that one day you're going to die.
Well, pretty much. That's true. I mean, and until you go through it, a lot of the awkwardness about grief changes once you have grief in your life. And it definitely is a perspective changer and a value changer in your life. And what's interesting to me is that when you have someone when you lose someone and you get that perspective change, that time limitation, the value of relationships change. And then it can wane a little, because life is busy, and maybe you haven't experienced, and then now it's been a few years, and then and people can kind of revert back, and they get soft, and we forget, and then something else happens, and we go, wait a minute, that's right, I have to get back on track. I have a limited time on this earth. I have I have to take of my sphere of influence of people. These are the people who are going to be with me. These are the people who matter. And all of this else, everything else is going to be noise. And so that is one great benefit of grief, is that it does bring that perspective. But Cody, it's not always a good perspective. Sometimes people are like, I'm done dealing with this person. I'm only going to deal with these people. It still changes the value. Not always in the up. Some people are like, that's it, I'm done. I can only give so much to these people. If they're not going to be there, that's it. And so it does make life more streamlined, and really it just makes life more valuable.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned that it's not always positive, because people, I think you even mentioned it earlier, that sometimes relationships between family members are sometimes severed in this process. And I think a lot of times there's things that happen before that point. I don't think it's just the death of a loved one that separates those people. I think there's for a long time, there's been some sort of tension there. And I think that family member is a lot of times the common
Yes, they are.
the common person between them. You know what I mean? And then
They're the
once that
common
happens,
denominator that keeps
right,
everyone together. Wait
right.
till a parent dies, and then I have no reason to ever talk to my brother now,
Hmm.
kind of thing
Yep.
happens. And that just breaks the heart of your parent. You know it does.
Right.
It's the last thing they would have wanted.
Yeah.
So that can happen. And I certainly don't touch on that in the book, because the idea is you really want to keep people together. But when people become ill, that often what'll happen if you have a couple of family members, there's usually someone in a family that is the caregiver of everyone else. The one
Right.
that is the mender, the fixer. We call it this, the middle child. It's not always middle child, but and so when you have this is where this typically happens. You'll have two things. You'll have a parent gets ill, and they just throw everything on one person because they're the one that always fixed it. And that becomes resentful because just because they can fix it, it's not right, nor is it fair for other family members to not take on their equal responsibility. And so the resentment tends to build.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also, you get these family rivalries where you have someone that was the weak link as the children, and that person got more attention from the parents because they were the weaker link. And you don't realize that till you get older. And then they tend to resent them. Things happen. So it's, that family dynamic is a tough one. And the worst thing that can happen is for it to come out during a funeral, for it to come out during this time of remembrance, and where it comes to light, and you stop honoring the person that you're at a funeral for, and remembering their life, and it becomes a family feud or a family problem in a public situation, and that happens, and that's really tough too. And there's ways to get around that. There's ways to change that pretty quickly, but I've had my own Jerry Springer moments, and they happen, and you have to move through them and keep focus.
That's right. I mean, it's really hard to say what you would do and wouldn't do in that situation. But it's also really hard to see people in that situation and not be irritated, because that is extremely disrespectful to the person that passed away, but I mean, it's easy to say that on the outside.
Prepare to say just in case, though.
Yeah.
You can come prepared, and you still have to show up. You can't use it as an excuse not to show up. That's a big deal. You have families that are not getting along. People are individuals. They experienced their childhood very different. You may have lived in the same home and had the same parents and were in the same neighborhood, but you had a different experience in all of those situations. And you may be an adult and you live in California, and your family was raised in New York, so you're not connected. And you go to a funeral, you still have to show up. People, they can say, well, I don't get along with so and so. You still have to show up and prepare and be honorable, because you don't want to give people more ammunition against you.
Right.
Doing the right thing doesn't take a lot of time, doesn't take a lot of words, doesn't take a lot of effort, but showing up. And if someone wants to get you in an altercation, or someone says, hey, what are you here for? You know why you're here. I'm here to honor Uncle Bob because he meant a lot to me. Done. Done. So be the best. It's always an opportunity also to be the better person. It's an opportunity to actually change another relationship. It's an opportunity to open up conversation. And as long as you keep those conversations around honor and love and good memories, you're going to come out on top. And so funerals can be a good situation to make relationships better.
What I really like about this conversation is that, at least so far, we're not really tiptoeing around a lot of things. Like we're kind of just saying it really how it is. And I think, that's one thing about this whole space that really is really actually fascinating to me. Like people who, like morticians, people who own funeral homes, they're like some of the most practical people I feel like that are on the face of the planet, because they have a grieving family that is here, and they have to discuss the business of the funeral expenses and all that stuff at some point in the process. They have to talk about that, and it's just like, man, that is crazy. First of all, these people see a different side of human life that most of us don't see. I mean, they work with people to prepare them for a funeral, which is like most people, myself included, could not do that. Like, they just simply could not work with people in that, at that stage of, I guess, life. But then also too, they had to have a conversation at some point with the family about, this grieving process also has a cost attached to it, which is the cost. And that's just like, that's crazy. Now, sometimes, I don't know, maybe they go through insurance or whatever, that's kind of different, but a lot of times they don't. A lot of families pay for the funeral of their loved one. And that's just, man, that's like, I think that is like the top tier like business conversation, because that's like, how do you take emotion out of that and talk like have a practical conversation? I mean, I've been in
Yeah.
that situation before with a family member. It was kind of different. I know how we did it, but I'm just saying, man, that's got to be not an easy thing.
No, but they're gifted. I think that's a calling to
For sure.
work in a funeral
For
home,
sure.
and they're gifted at that. And most of the people are going through some type of PTSD. So those first few days when someone passes, even if you're somewhat prepared for it because maybe they were ill, but maybe you weren't. Maybe it was quicker than you thought, or just the reality set in. Even if they were sick, it could have been something very quick, like a car accident or an overdose or just a heart attack. Even if you weren't prepared for it, you're in a PTSD. You're in shock. You'll be in shock for a few days, and that's often when you are talking to someone who runs a funeral home or how you're making these arrangements. It's exhausting. It's extremely time consuming, and and it's often just more expense than you realize. They have a lot of things that they can help with, and it's wonderful that they're professionals. And I would say almost all of them, in my experience, have made it easier on the family and easier on me. They were just so good at what they do, and it is a gift.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so, for sure. I mean, because like I said, I myself could not do it. Like, I certainly could not do it. I feel like, I would be able to do other things that maybe people had that same opinion on, like, oh, I could never do that. It's not for me or whatever. But like, the death thing is like, I don't know, man. That just, but I mean, it makes you, I guess it makes you grateful for people who have that gift, because like I said, I think it would be very difficult for definitely for myself to be in that space. I mean, it was difficult for me to be in that space on the other side of it, like on the family side, in
Yeah.
that space.
Seeing dead people, seeing a body that has no more life in it, that's not
Yeah.
comfortable for everybody.
Right.
And so everyone has things that they can do. Like, I couldn't be a dentist. I can't look in people's mouths all day long. Or a podiatrist. Or, sometimes you can't work with elderly or young children or animals. There's a certain jobs. I couldn't pick up trash. That would just, the smell would kill me. I just couldn't do it. But it doesn't bother. So it's nice. We all have our calling in life, but that doesn't bother. That is something that doesn't bother them. And there are people that don't have a hard time going to funerals if it's an open casket. Just that thought alone is so creepy for them. It's so hard that they try to get out of it.
So that's a good point. And I don't know if you get into this or not. I know your book is titled "What Not to Say," so I don't know if you get into like helping people through the grieving process. But I mean, what do you like, just in that space and sort of, I guess, knowing what you know about it? Do you recommend somebody going to that? Because I heard, so like when my mother passed away, I guess it was 6 years ago now, almost 7 years ago. So it was like, there were a bunch of people that said, if you don't go, you're going to regret it, type thing, and like all this kind of stuff. And I know that's not for everybody, but I mean, do you have any kind of advice in that situation? I personally,
I'm
would think.
opinionated on this one.
What's that?
I'm opinionated on this one.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think, you go. When it's, especially like when it's an open casket, Cody, for years, I didn't realize I didn't have to go to the casket. No one
Hmm.
told me. I mean, I would be a teenager and I was there supporting a family member of the deceased person, and I would still go to the casket and go on my knees and just count to like 30. And I just thought we all had to do that. You don't have to.
Hmm.
You don't have to do that. That is for folks who feel that that's at that point they need to say a last goodbye and they want to do it in person and they're not going to take a photo. They're not going to. And if you don't feel like that you need to do that, or that's something that is not part of your spiritual belief, you're not there for that.
Right.
You're there for the grievers. You're there to show that their relationship mattered or this person mattered. And so if your little symbol of discomfort for that 15 minutes that you have to be there, you're going to put that on a scale with these folks that have this cinder block of grief. How can you make that about you? That's, in my opinion, you don't have to deal with this, with looking at people that are dead. You can go around it. You can, avoid that closer contact. But for you not to show because you're slightly uncomfortable is a perspective of that you don't need to have. It's not about you.
Yeah.
And people will know you didn't show.
Well, so I agree with that. But I guess what I'm asking is like specifically for the family members, because I think some people like in the family of the person, they have this belief that like they don't want to remember, they don't want that to be the last time they see this person. They don't want to have that memory of that being the last time they see them. And so I guess the funeral would be
I have an opinion on that too.
Okay. What's your opinion?
You won't. I don't think you will. I think that's an anomaly, because as you go through the grieving period and it's difficult in that moment. And I'll use my own experience. When I saw my son deceased, I don't think about that. I was up close. You think I think about that all the time? Absolutely not. It's the memories you think of. It's the joyful times you had. All of this difficulty and all this sadness will begin to subside. And what's amazing, just the gift that happens, is that what seems to just float to the surface of our lives are the positive experiences. Those memories tend to get better, even if they're not, it's not exact, but the memories of the relationships that we have, the people that pass, those jokes, those good times, those are the ones that stay to the surface, they float, and they stay there forever. These tend to be a temporary thing because it's not them.
Right.
So you say, that's the last time I'm going to remember. I'm going to think of them. Yeah, but that's not the last time you were in connection with them. That's not the last time you shared a meal with them. You're not in a relationship with them with the deceased during the funeral. That's a different relationship now. So I have just not met anyone who thinks about that. And I've gotten a lot of grief counseling, which I think is great, and I'm in grief support groups through the military, and that's not a conversation in my years of conversations that's ever come up. So if it happened, it might be they're dwelling on it intentionally. But the good news is that it's not a reality.
That's a good way to put that. Yeah, I think in my personal experience, one thing that really helped me was that, like, this process that we were going through with this funeral, whatever that process was not the person that I was attached to, like that I loved. You know what I mean? Like this was the end of a temporary life on earth. And when I say this, like I have compassion for people in this space, because I know not everybody feels this, but like I've never really felt connected, like at the cemetery. I've never really felt like I need to visit the cemetery to, visit or whatever, be present.
Yeah.
Because just like what you said, it's like the outside things. Like, yeah, I'll never forget that when my mother had her funeral, either the day of or the day after, sometimes shortly after, there was a rainstorm, and off in the distance, like she was like buried on the cemetery that she's in sort of has like a there's a hillside basically to it, and you can see kind of off in the distance. Off in the distance, there was probably the first time in my life I had ever seen a complete rainbow from start to finish. Like it was a complete.
Wow.
Like sometimes you just see like a half of it or a quarter of it, a partial, whatever. So like, but this was like a complete rainbow off in the distance, and it's just like things like that to me personally is where I feel that connection. But I know some people really have a hard time with, I guess maybe the physical manifestation of that person which they feel connected to in a cemetery, and I understand that. It's just that's not been
It's not me either.
right.
But for those, I'm perfectly happy that there's folks that go, no, I'd like to go there, and that's where I feel I can speak to them.
Mm-hmm.
And if that works for them, then I think that's just great. I love the fact that they're still they're still in relationship with them, because I feel like I'm still in relationship with everyone that's deceased. It's just I can't contact. I can't. It's just different,
right?
But one thing that you mentioned that I have that I think people sometimes don't want to share with folks is that we have these moments, like you had a moment, and people see rainbows, and people see cardinals, and people see butterflies, and there are things in nature that's just being nature.
Yep.
But when there's moments where nature acts unnatural, when they stand in front, or someone goes to the cemetery, or they're at home, or they're thinking of their loved ones, or there's an event happening, and all of a sudden that butterfly or that bird or that song or that rainbow comes up, and it's almost as if it's trying to get your attention, when they're not acting in a natural way where they would flutter off 2 seconds after knowing you're in their space and you're the giant Godzilla. But when they're actually pausing, wanting to get your attention, and staying there in a natural way, and in that moment you are lifted, and you have memory, and you have love, and you have connection. You can't push those out as just being coincidence. I do believe that when in those moments of supernatural pause, it allows us to feel the love and blessing and relationship of those people that have passed. And I think we need to embrace those moments. And sometimes we can't share those with just everybody, but don't not embrace them, and remember them forever and ever, and write them down, because those are true connections.
Yeah.
In your rainbow, there's a true connection. So, it's a little something because you noticed it.
Well, and that's and that's kind of the thing too, man. And that's what I mean is like when I honestly don't know how to say this, but it's like whatever the casket is for, and whatever the process of lowering the casket into the ground, and that being sort of the eternal, I guess, place on earth, that's not really what I had a connection to. It's like because I believe a person has a spirit and a soul. And so it's like, to me, it was that. And I think I do think a soul is eternal. I think a soul is basically limitless and eternal. But it's I guess what I'm trying to say is, when people have this anxiety maybe, or fear about going to the funeral home and seeing the person like that as the last time, I think that it's more like that physical attachment to this person versus the spiritual, because the spiritual, I think, is what we're talking about right here, the rainbow and the dove and all that kind of stuff.
And I think it also not only is their attachment to that person, which sounds like they also may have some unresolved shame or issues, or that they didn't deal with, but also sometimes that's compounded with their own fear of death, and their own reality, and that's very hard for some people, and it just is. Some people they have a larger fear of death and dying than others.
Yeah. No, and that's kind of what I was saying earlier about it really makes it real. It makes it like real that one day you're going to take your last breath. But like, I mean, just to sort of, I'll say this and then move on from this, just to sort of solidify the point that I'm trying to make here. Yeah. Like, if I'm talking to somebody, if I'm talking to you, or if I'm talking to somebody else, like, yeah, we have this physical body, we have this, visual representation of who we might be on this earth. But like I don't think that's who we are. Like there's something inside of that is who we are. Like there's a being inside of you and inside of me that's sort of our being. This human body is just sort of a temporary existence. I think there's something deeper inside of that is who, and that's what I'm saying. Like the connection to that thing. And I know it's really hard when you're in that situation, man, and there's grief going on and all this kind of stuff. It's hard to have that sort of separation, but it's like the thing that is inside that, or that was once inside that person in that temporary, form of existence. I think that spirit or that soul is the thing that we're all connected to.
And it gives you comfort, and it gives me comfort because I'm in agreement with you on all that. But what's interesting also is that when someone passes, even though we have this belief, that's also a time when people start questioning their beliefs.
Yeah.
And say, hey, and this is a time when people can get really angry because their beliefs didn't work out the way they intended them on being, and so that can become another touchy subject with someone, because you might be fine and then someone else is saying, hey, what the hell, this isn't right, this can't be, and then they start questioning all of afterlife or spirituality or their religious beliefs. And grief can definitely sever those and ignite all kinds of new philosophies. And so that's another reason people have to be kind of careful, because where someone may have been a month ago or a few weeks ago before someone passed and where they are now in these spiritual beliefs can be very different. So you also have to be kind of careful what you say around them. Let's say a child dies. It's a big deal. A little kid dies. And someone says, and they're churchgoers, and someone says, well, they're in a better place. Well, that mom might just want to, that might anger them. They might be in a place of, this can't be the better place. This can't be right. So you have to be very aware of your audience when you're speaking to someone who's experiencing extreme grief in their life, and that they may be in a different place.
Yeah, I kind of want to make a transition into that, man, about what shouldn't be said at funerals, because that is the title of your book. But because, man, I think back, and I want to believe that this came from a place of love. People thought they were doing the right thing, and they thought they were being actual thoughtful. But I can't tell you how many times, and I've heard people say this same thing, how many times a person said, if you need anything, let me know. And it's like, dude, there's not a single thing on this planet that a person on this planet can do in that situation to help you. I mean, unless you can bring the person back, that's probably the only thing that can be done. But I understand the message there. There's assistance that needs to be had. There's things going on. A lot of people, especially around where I'm from in the Southeast, like providing food for the family is a very big thing, which is, always appreciated. But I don't know. But when you hear people say the same thing over and over and over and over, it's like, it's almost like that message is almost like it's a standard versus like a authentic, like, desire to help, if that makes sense. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful by the people that say that. I know it comes from a place. Well, I do think it comes from a place of love and well-meaning, but it's just, man, like you hear that, person after person, and it's like,
and there's no initiative behind it. I would love to be the person. I'm a good wingman, and if I could be the wingman at a funeral, I would be good with that. Every time I'd have my freaking little list, and every time someone said, "Hey, do you need anything?" I'm like, they should say, "Yes, Barb," and Barb would say, "Yeah, I got a list. Sign up. Here's all the things you can do for them," because until you've gone through it, you don't realize. We mentioned it earlier. It's a lot of work. When someone passes, it's a lot of work.
Yep.
The funeral's a lot of work. Going through their stuff is a lot of work. Going through their effects is a lot of work. Just managing all of what's going to happen now is a lot of work. Maybe you have a parent died and the other parent is now here. How about what's going to happen with all their care? That's so much work. And you still have to do your laundry. You may have 2 weeks at your job only for grieving, maybe 3 days. It's all different. Their lawn still has to get mowed. Who's watering the plants? What if this is across town or across states? How are they going to get there? Who's going to watch their house when they do get there? What if they can't take their kids? There's a million things you can do for someone, and giving them a chore to make a list and find what you're going to do for them is not helpful. That is a huge complaint from people who are grieving. It's just take the initiative. I know in some circles and some, townships that people will automatically bring food, but especially if you're a little older and maybe that was something you've seen happen. But people aren't even doing that anymore. You need to eat. And I have a list of all kinds of things you can do for people. And you don't have to ask. And I'll give you just a few, or they can also buy the book, which is fine too. But if it's someone you know, get them a cleaning service. Say, here's a free maid service. You can sign up. They can switch it out. You can let them know maybe they can't come that day, but they don't have time to clean their house, and then they got to live on all that. How about go do their laundry, watch their kids, walk their dog, mow their lawn. You don't have to ask them to mow their lawn. Just go mow their lawn. You may not quite need it. Just go mow it. Just say, hey, I know this is in Missouri and you live in Massachusetts. How are you getting to the airport? I'll drive you. I'll drive you. If it's 3:00 in the morning, they're not going to Disney World. You are now the best Uber driver, in the country, and you're going to make a small sacrifice for their giant sacrifice. Don't say, if they say, I might need a ride to the airport. Oh, well, that doesn't fit my schedule. Okay. Goodbye. There's so many little things you can do. And you show up a month later. Now, all the busyness is gone. The craziness is gone. If you show up and do any of that stuff a month later, just a note, here's I'm having some food delivered to your house. And with just a note, just thinking about you. I know it's not over yet. I know you're still, going through it all. And I just was thinking about you. A month later, I'll never, ever, ever forget that person. They're on my Christmas card list forever. That kind of thoughtfulness a week or a month later is more valuable than everyone who thought of me that first 10 days.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good point too, because it I think that is real. The months leading up after that are probably more important, I would say, than the immediate, week or so after the death, because most people I think are probably inundated with people support and that kind of thing at that time period. But I think a couple months after that is really important. I remember
pro tip. That's a pro tip for grieving.
Yeah, I know for sure.
Later or 3 months later, you don't have to do it forever. You don't have to mow the
Right.
lawn forever. But
Right.
you show up later, you are a hero.
Yeah,
You're the coolest guy on the block forever now.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's important too to understand the person, because like when my mother passed away, I was like, some people they need that sense of community. They want to be around other people. Some people needed to be alone. Like, so my specific situation, I wanted to be around my family because I wanted to be there for them. That gave me a sense of it gave me a sense of purpose and direction in that time, to something to do, to put that energy into. But as far as the healing goes, I needed to be by myself for that. That's different. That's different for the people, for the different people involved.
But you knew that. You know yourself.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Some people don't know themselves as well, and because, like we mentioned much earlier, grief is an experience that they don't have a platform for. They don't have a process for yet. And as you begin to experience different types of grief, you'll develop a larger platform and things to do. But you don't have that skill set yet. And we have to be very careful about leaving some people alone. There's, in Jewish communities, there used to be, and there still is in some circles, where every family member would take a designated time to sit with the griever. If someone's spouse died or a family member died, for that immediate family, they would sit with them. They didn't even talk to them. They could talk if they wanted to, but they were a person in the room, so that if they needed anything or didn't want to be alone, they had that. And to me, I thought that's a wonderful way for everyone in the family
Yeah.
to participate. But also, in my own experience, there were times when I thought, you know, people take their own lives. People say, look, if they're gone, I'm going to go too. That also happens. And so because you don't know and to the most solid of people, so you, even when people like yourself said, I need some time alone, because you're a giver, you're a caregiver, you naturally put yourself aside to make sure everyone's okay. And when they've done that, then you can retreat and go back and recharge and begin healing. But ultimately, all healing is going to happen in some kind of relationship. And to let someone know, hey, it's Cody, I need a little time alone. I'll be back in a bit. Or I'm okay if I'm alone right now. And if we were family and you said, I'm like you, I need some time alone. I need some space. I extrovert and then I introvert it. But I don't want you to be alone too long. If this was you, and I would say, okay, I'm going to call you tomorrow. I'm going to text you tomorrow, and I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
So that I'm thinking of you, and then I'm going to follow through. Because you don't have all that platforms. I don't know how much time you're going to need. You don't know how much time you're going to need, but just to make sure someone's checking on you, to say, hey, I'm checking in. That's it. I just want you to know that you're not alone in that connection.
I think that's important. I think what I wanted to ask as far as that goes is like distinguishing these people, like who these people are. I don't know if you get into that or not, because, some
No.
people, like we're talking about this in sort of a very, I don't know, mostly a negative space, but I think some people see death as a positive thing. Some people celebrate life versus mourning death. And
Oh
so,
yeah.
I think it's like really important to know who these people are and maybe the situation that they're in, because obviously you don't want to do the opposite of what their process is. That would be an absolute catastrophe. So like, how do you determine, I guess, what would be the proper way to approach a person to see what their process is going forward with this, whether they're celebrating the life or mourning the death, or if they are a person that needs alone time, or if they don't need alone time? I mean, how do you find these things out? Because we're talking about what not to say. So how do you find these things out in a way that's still respectful, do you
Well, I
think?
think some of the ways that it's just going to come up. I mean, if you become aware that there's been a death, you're going to know partially just by the way the family is going to. Are they going to have a funeral? Are they a memorial service? Is this a military service? Are they not going to have anything and just have a celebration of life, which is very popular now? And those happen all different ways, depending on the deceased. So, especially since after COVID, those became even more popular. And I think with the younger generation, they're looking for ways to get together and validate where it's more of an open platform. But that doesn't mean and usually that's outside of the funeral. So sometimes the way to discover what the person's going to be like is just in the process of what they plan on doing for someone. If they say, I can't do anything right now, then you kind of have an idea they're in a place of deep sadness, because missing people is really sad. So I think everyone's an individual. I think a lot of times you kind of have an idea of what's going on. You're not going in and assuming anything. That's really all you have to do. If you approach someone about, hey, I just heard so and so died, and it's going to be a big loss for the team or something. You get their response, and then you take it from there, because I think all of it is just kind of not assuming. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Yeah, that does make sense.
This is my standard way of dealing with people and assuming that, because also you might be speaking to someone one day and they're fine, and the next day they're just crying all day.
Right.
So being able to be flexible and is really key.
Okay. Yeah, I guess like even though people do celebrate their celebrations of life, probably the thing to not do is just go in and just say let's party. You know what I mean? That's not the first thing
Yeah.
you want to say to somebody.
Oh no, people
Um,
have done that. They've gone to a
I'm sure they
funeral
have.
and
Yeah.
brought shot glasses with them
Oh yeah.
or a memorial service. I'm thinking of a memorial service because I never really went to memorial service on the West Coast. I was very Christian, and then out here it was more Catholic. And then we did wakes,
Hmm.
which I wasn't familiar with till I moved to the East Coast. And so at this wake, you're standing in line to, the receiving line, and there was guys who had brought like whiskey shot glasses,
Hmm.
and that did not go over well.
I bet
Um,
not.
so that was not the appropriate time for that. It wasn't about them. They could have done that outside.
Yep.
They could have done that in the parking lot. They could have done it afterwards. They all could have met at the pub they used to go to. They should have done it there. It's not something to do in front of mom and grandma and some other people saying, hey, we're not partying right now.
Mm-hmm.
Look around. We're grieving and we're honoring. And then you can go on and do your own thing later. And that's okay. It's just time and place is everything. Right. And now hopefully it's what not to do at funerals book will help. But we're a little clueless.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's why your book is probably helpful. So I want to ask a couple things before we close. Do you have like stories of maybe some of like what's the most bizarre story that you've heard that happened at a funeral that probably shouldn't have? That you can say without identifying anybody?
No, I don't mind offending anyone. And if they're going to do, there's a lot. I mean, there's family physical fights that happen, which is crazy town. There's people. A couple bad things happen. There's always someone who's trying to make themselves. Here's the thing. There's so many where people make themselves the center of attention.
Oh yeah.
And that is just the worst thing you can do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the best thing a funeral director can do, or someone like you would be a good person to do this, is you got to bring that person out of the you got to take them out of the arena. If there's someone that's walking around going, and this happens. I had a friend, and her sister lived out of state and was detached from the family. She was odd to them. And the father went through a number of medical situations. They did everything they could. And she's at this funeral going, they didn't get the second opinion I wanted them to get. I think everything would have been different if they asked me. They never asked me. They never included me. Me. Dad said, Dad could have been here if maybe they should have gone to, what? She's walking around having conversations about how this all could have been different.
You know what? Not to interrupt you. You know what I think when I hear that? Like what I think is that person, she feels guilty because she didn't have that relationship with this person and she's trying to pacify that guilt.
Oh yeah. And she's loud about it.
Yeah.
Someone had to say, hey, can you come over here? I want to, can you come outside with me for a minute and say, hey, this is a poor conversation. This is uncomfortable conversation. And and not everyone's going to do that, or force her to change the conversation. Say, hey, this is not good conversation. Can we just focus on Dad's good things? Can we focus on this? You have to ask them to focus on something else. You have to give them something else to focus on. You can't just like your little kids. You can't say, stop jumping on the bed. You guys say, put your feet on the floor. And you say, hey, can we talk about this? Let's talk about that. And you need people like that. There are people that just say, well, like they didn't know how someone died. I think we mentioned this. I had someone, and he just they didn't know how the person died. The person had been murdered, and they didn't know what had happened. And all they did was really go to that funeral to really find out what's going on. And they're asking all kinds of questions. Do they think this could happen? I wonder if this, like they're trying to create their own CSI show. You have to have someone in there who's willing to say, hey, let's go outside. You have to have people who are in your court who are going to be there to say, hey, this might be appropriate. I see you're taking photos. I see you're taking selfies. Yeah. I see you guys are cutting up. There's another place for that. And you're going to be remembered for those kind of things.
Right. I do think that like somebody should take that role, but I don't think it should be I don't think it should be the family. I don't think the family should have that responsibility of, if somebody sees that in a funeral, I don't think it should be a family member connected to that person. I think it should be somebody else, like a friend or whatever, whoever's there.
Or the funeral director. They can
Right,
ask them to say,
right.
these are things we don't want. I know there's going to be quite a large crowd. There's some things that we're really not comfortable with,
Mhm.
and can you help us out with that? But I will say before we close, the number one thing that comes out, the number one question that I get is that people say, "What can I say other than I'm sorry?"
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
That seems to be the biggest question. And because even though some people don't mind the word I'm saying, hearing I'm sorry, sometimes I've heard grievers say, I don't want to hear it again.
Hmm.
And it's I'm not against saying I'm sorry, because you're sorry that this is happening. But I think if you can just add another sentence to it, you'll be fine. Mostly what people want to hear is relationship. It's really all about the
Right.
relationship. So if you go up to someone, you don't have to say it. You can say, it's a colleague at work. You can say this sucks if it's someone who's appropriate with that. You don't have to say anything. You can just say this sucks. You can say, I'm really going to miss Bob. He's the funniest guy at work. That's other than I'm sorry. You can say, you can't compare one grief to another, but if you just add anything that has to do with the relationship, I'm really sorry that, Teresa's not here.
Hmm.
We're really going to miss her. She meant a lot to me. Done. She meant a lot to me. Now that means this is happening. You can say, I'm so sad.
Hmm.
I'm so sad, and I know you're sad. I don't always know what to say. And then say, I'm sorry, I didn't know what to say. I'm just overwhelmed.
Hmm.
That's okay. They're overwhelmed too.
Yeah.
And if you can't speak because if they're a hugger, just hug them a little longer. Just embrace. Don't give them a hug. Just give them a little embrace. You didn't have to say that either. Just let them know that that you're feeling a loss also.
Hmm.
And that pretty much clears that all up.
Well, I think one thing for people to be aware of is that I think it's really easy to underestimate the impact of just your presence. I mean, you might not be a person that has something you can say or has, any sort of wise words or anything, but I think just your presence of being there, I think that will do wonders for that person who is grieving.
It
You were
does.
telling
I
this
mean, this is
story,
life. This is not a Netflix subscription. This is
right?
real. You
Right.
send a real card, you show up,
Hmm.
because it doesn't take a lot of your time, but that little bit of effort is a lifeline. It's a
Yeah.
lifeline to people who are grieving.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like I said, just your presence. You were telling this story, and I couldn't help but laugh because I was reminded of one of my friends at the time. He sent some flowers to the funeral home for my mother, and so I have a landscaping company, and anyways, he was there, and he was like, he was very disappointed in how the flowers ended up, like what it ended up looking like. It was basically like a fern. There was no flower on it. It was just green, like just a green plant. And he was like, man, I can't believe, he was like, I'm really disappointed in that. He was like, and he told me, he was like, don't take your weed eater to that thing, man. Don't cut that thing down, like mow it down. And I'll never forget that, because it was just so like, I mean, he's a really nice guy, but like just that being timed when it was really, that was at the funeral home before the funeral. And so, but I think things like that, I think a person's, but that is his personality. That's who he is. Like that's what he is. And so I think a person's personality really shines in moments like that, whether it's somebody who's supportive or somebody who, makes people laugh or whatever. I think there's a right time for it, obviously, but I think that's the beauty of having different personalities, and people being in different spaces.
See, but you know him. You know
Yeah.
him, and you know that wasn't up to par, and that was killing him because he wanted he wanted to use that as a means,
Right.
to show. And men more than women really need something tangible,
Mm.
often to do or to say, or to give, to express that. And that
Hmm.
was just not up to par. Now you could have someone on the side who's hearing the conversation is going, what does anybody care? What is
Yeah.
grieving? And so, but they don't matter,
Right.
And so but then you would say, that's Joey, man. I love the fact that he said that.
Mm.
Now, if you said that to the person that was like, what was that about? You go, that's Joey. I love him. That meant so much to me. Now, Now you've immediately taken away any uncomfortable feeling that overhearer, has about this man. Now she elevates his quality instead of, de-escalated it. So it's however,
Well,
it's really important to know your audience, and if a mistake is made, it's real easy to fix as long as you fix it real fast.
yep. So first of all, I do know the person, and that is his personality.
Right.
But so this was the funeral for my mother. But a couple years before that, or whatever, I don't know exactly when, his dad passed away. So he sort of had, a similar. I mean, I guess he maybe knew the space we were in, and I think that makes it even more, I guess, valuable that he did that.
It does make it is becomes an us and them. There's a lot of us and thems in the world. You go college, no college, business, no business, home, no home, kids, no kids, grandkids, no grandkids. There's a lot of us and thems where you have an immediate understanding with someone, and loss is it. People like, oh, did you lose a parent? Yeah, I lost a parent. Boom. You immediately have a connection with someone. And so grief does bring a lot of people together in understanding. And if I know that you grieve, I can probably talk to you about a lot of other things I'm going to feel comfortable with, because I know you have a depth of understanding about life and situations and family
sure.
that other people just don't have. And that can actually benefit you if it's in the business relationship, an acquaintance, or your friends.
Yeah, no, I agree. So before we close, I got two things I want to ask you. One, do you have, I know you have a book. Do you have a link for that book that you can send it to me? I'll put it in the description. Where is it? Where's the book at? Do you have social media or website you want to share?
I do. I have it's on Amazon.
Okay.
I'll send you a link. People can buy it on Amazon. See, it's just a guide, quick and easy and to the point, very kind of punchy. And I talk in the book just like we talk now.
Yeah.
That's not cool. And so, but we're working on a landing page for that.
Okay.
I have another book coming out in a couple months. It's very different than this, but just as short and just as punchy on a totally different topic. So we're trying to figure out if we're going to add that on to another website, or just have them separate, or just do them all together. So real close, almost there.
Okay. So do you want to share social medias or anything, or do you want to keep that sort of private?
You mean like if they want to contact me directly?
Yeah. I was just any kind of contact information that you want to give.
Oh yeah,
people.
they can contact me through email. Absolutely.
Okay.
That's bohartpro@gmail.com.
Okay.
And I'd be happy to answer any questions, or if there's anything they felt I should add in. That's okay. We can always make adjustments.
Okay.
It's just my opinion and my experience, but there always could be more to it. I would love to help or listen.
Okay. So the last thing, and I'm sure that this is going to be a very profound thing coming from you, if you could share the most valuable, or one of the most valuable lessons you've ever learned. If you're comfortable sharing something from your personal life, it can be that, it can be from the book, from your career. What do you think is one of the most valuable? This is the piece of wisdom I ask everybody for, going with the theme of the podcast. What do you think is one of the most important, most valuable lessons you've ever learned?
Wow. Honestly, Cody, I just got flooded with information. But I'd say, as of today, in this moment, I think one of the most valuable things that people should know is that it takes just as much energy to think of and creative energy to think of a negative possible outcome than a positive possible outcome. And that every day you have that choice to say, hey, something good can come out of this, something bad could come out of this. And that is to change the trajectory of everything you do and everything that comes to you. And
I love that.
It's a good day, because we're always looking at the positive side of everything.
Yep. Yeah, I love that, because I think the story or the meaning that you attach. I reference this book a lot, Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl. I don't know if you've read it. He was a Holocaust survivor. He was in the Holocaust. He was a psychiatrist. I think the story,
life-changing book.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. For sure. For sure. I think what you tell yourself about what it is that's happening, or happened to you, I think that really makes a difference. I think that is at the core of what cognitive behavioral therapy is that a lot of therapists use. I might be wrong about that, but I think that's a big philosophy of it, is changing what the thing means to you. There was a coach I was talking to a couple days ago on the podcast, and he was talking about, he used the word experience. Like, one of his pillars is experience, people changing what they think they experience through a thing.
Mhm.
And that's why mentioned way back earlier in the podcast, in this podcast, about, like, it's not necessarily that death is a positive thing, but I think that depending on the story that you tell yourself about it, because a lot of people, myself included, they experience a death like that, and then they dive into something that is, productive, or they help other people around them, or whatever it is. And people can argue that, if you do that, you're not really allowing yourself to heal. But it's like, I went through that, man. I know how I healed. I know what I did. Like, so anyway, but it's like, you have that. It's almost like a, and it's bad to even, it's almost bad to even say it this way, but it's almost like a source of energy that you can use to put into something else, whether that's the people around you, helping your family members who are grieving, putting it into a business, a book, whatever it is. You can create something out of that. And I'm not trying to minimize it or make light of it, but I think that if you just change what you think the thing means to you, because what's the alternative? You're going to go through it and go through that pain for what? For nothing?
Right. And I, as of course, I think there's something I would love to say. Really, no matter what your beliefs are in the moment or as they change, I don't believe, and I don't, that anyone who's passed wants to have the weight of feeling that because of their passing, it has diminished your life. It
Hmm.
has made you sad. It has made you hopeless. It has made you less connected with people. There's
Yeah.
no one that's passed that wants to say, "Oh, this is my passing caused this for you."
Hmm.
So to honor some of the people that I know have passed, I don't want that to happen, because I wouldn't want that if when I die. I don't want the people that are going to miss me. I know they're going to miss me. I don't
Hmm.
want them any more sad than they would be. I don't want them angry. I don't want them sad. I don't want them lost, and I don't want them lonely because of my death.
Right.
And so I know that I wouldn't want that, and I know that the people who loved me don't want that.
Hmm.
And so I always encourage people to remember that it's okay to miss people. Of course, we're human. The more
Hmm.
we miss them, the more we miss them, it's the more we loved them,
Right.
you know? But that to carry on and feel that we need to have a badge of despair or loneliness or detachment, um, is not, I wouldn't want that.
Yeah.
I would feel horrible if my death caused my loved ones to feel any of those things. And so it's always good to think, no, do something, do
Yeah.
anything, make, give a compliment, write a book, do a marathon,
Hmm.
anything that makes you feel like you honor them, they will be honored, and they will be happy, and they will continue to love you forever.
Yeah. It's crazy that you say that, man, because we were talking earlier about the celebration of life. And I honestly think that's what I would rather my family do for me. Like, just have the biggest party you've ever had, man. Just like send me out with a party. That's
And
the way I would rather
everybody
have it.
talks. I want everybody to come up with some fun thing that I said to them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everybody has a
Yeah.
barbism. I'm working on the playlist, because by the time I pass, no one's going to know any of my music.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
but it's death is a great resetter.
Hmm.
It's not easy, but it's something we have to. Uh, it's part of our experience.
Well, the big thing is that death can be really the start of another life for you, if you're in this space, and if you put this energy into something else, if you become aware of this, if you become more connected to other people, if you value your time more, you see that life is limited, and it's not forever. So I think it can be, and it sounds philosophical, but I think death can really be the rebirth to a new life for a lot of us.
Well said.
So, look, man, it's been a great conversation. I'm gonna let you get out of here. If you can hang out for just a couple minutes, I'm gonna explain the upload to you. But I want to be respectful of your time, so I do appreciate it. And
Yeah.
if you I know we talked about links. If you have all the links, you can send them to me. I'll put them in the descriptions. But it's been good talking with you today.
Well, my pleasure.
Yeah, man. Hey, guys, I really appreciate everybody tuning in today. If you found this content or this episode useful and intriguing, you can visit us on social media. This is Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Rumble, YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Music, and Apple and Google Podcasts. Pure Wisdom Podcast on all social medias. You can interact with us, follow, like, and share there, and we will see you guys next time.